I want to introduce everyone. Some of you who are in songwriting may have met Candace on Monday, but I want to introduce you all to Candace Newman, who is the CEO of Live Out Live. And the Grammy Museum is partnering with Live Out Live for industry sessions this year to bring in industry professionals. So we're so thankful for Candace for her work and helping us to elevate this course. And Candace, I'll turn it over to you.
Of course. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure meeting you and seeing some of you guys again. Um, if you recall, I'm here to invite an industry professional in the music business space who's going to come and share some of their experience and talk a little bit about themselves as a music industry professional. And so I am going to allow Channing to introduce herself and AD as well. But AD is a member of the Live Out Live board. And so he's here representing for Live Out Live Foundation's board. And he is going to help guide the conversation along with Channing. But Channing's just going to share some of her insights after she does her introduction, and AD can introduce himself as well. But I'll go ahead and mute so that you guys can spend some time enjoying talking to AD. I guess some of you guys can drop some questions in the chat, and if during the session they want to answer them in real time, they can, or you guys can always reserve them for the end, but you can feel free to drop them in the chat just so you can recall what they were and reference them when it's time to ask. All right, so go ahead, AD and Channing, if you want to introduce yourself, and go ahead and take the conversation away for today.
Hello, everyone. Glad everybody's here. Excited for y'all to learn about from one of my good friends, Channing, today. But my name is AD, as Candace said. I sit on the board of Live Out Live, but I'm also the head of Sing Licensing at Mass Appeal, as well as the founder of Chosen Musicians, that we do music supervision. And I'm here just to host, and we're going to learn a lot about all the agreements that we hear about in the news today. We're gonna have some fun though. But I'm gonna let Channing introduce herself because she has a lot of new things happening, exciting things happening. So Channing, welcome to the board.
Thank you guys. I'm really happy to be here today. Everyone, my name is Channing B. Smith. I am an entertainment attorney specializing mostly in music and music industry. And I have been practicing now as an attorney for about 5 years. But I've been working in entertainment in and around music since, oh my God, like over 10 years. It's been a really, really long time. And I think, the thing about music that I love so much after having practiced on, the television side and then also, being on the music side, it's just something that sort of speaks to me because I started out actually as a vocalist, as a singer-songwriter myself. And I had been performing since I was 8 years old. I've been on a stage. It was my favorite thing in the entire world. Former vocalist, a competitive cheerleader, dancer, the whole nine. So I was like, keep me on the stage. And when I got to college, I went to Dillard University in New Orleans. When I got to college, I was a member of the concert choir and stuff there. And, was very much so a vocal performance major, knew I was going to be doing music. And what got me into law was I actually ended up signing a production deal with a friend at the time that I was in school with. And, we were writing a bunch of songs. I was recording a lot of things. And I remember I just asked for a copy. I just wanted to get like some copies of the songs that I had done. And he was like, no, because I own them. And I was like, wait, what? It just threw me off. And I realized when I went back and like looked at the document I signed, because this was little 19-year-old me. And I was like, oh, wow, that's what this is. I don't think I know enough about this industry. And if everything revolves around, the agreements and the deals, and the lawyers are the ones who do the deals, well, hell, I'm smart. I'll just go to law school so I can like learn this business this way. And I ended up changing my major over into mass comm, and that just sort of started my trajectory into becoming an attorney. And so I say all that to say that I've had a really, really great time working on this side of the business and being in the music industry. And I've had, the honor of working at some really cool places. I started my career actually at Universal Music Enterprises, which is the catalog division of UMG, and I was there for a little bit, about 2.5 years. And after that, I, really kind of wanted to transition a little bit into content production and content legal and marketing. And so I left UME and went to Red Bull Media House, and I helped them understand, like, in terms of their content production, excuse me, how to use their proprietary audio library, which AD, I know you know a lot about audio libraries and sync and stuff like that. So I kind of worked on those things. And then after that, transitioned out of music completely and went into television. And I worked for a studio called Fifth Season. At the time, it used to be Endeavor Content, but some of the things that they produced are like the show Severance that's on Apple TV, and Nine Perfect Strangers on Hulu. So I got a chance to really immerse myself into the business of television, and thought it was super cool to like learn a new skill. But then I thought about it. I was like, I really don't even watch TV like that. So I was like, this probably isn't for me. And the next opportunity came around, and I ended up taking a role on the BA team at RCA Records, where I was for another about a year and a half, left there, and then went into private practice. And now I'm excited to announce that I just started my own practice. It's very, very new. I started this about, 3 weeks ago, right, AD? Is that what I tell you?
Think so.
Yeah, and I have been busy ever since, and it's kind of wild to be like, oh, I'm kind of going out on my own or whatever, but I feel like it makes sense, and it gives me the opportunity to work more now with directly with artists and provide them, the idea from like the label perspective, obviously, and having been on that side, you know, and kind of helping them to strategize and think about what should be going into their deals. And at the same time, it's also given me the ability to return back to music for myself, and keep singing again. And I've been doing that, and I've recorded my own stuff. So this year is shaping up to be pretty fantastic. Um, thank you. So I'm really, really, really happy about everything that's going on. But the number one thing that I've always enjoyed doing is lecturing, is teaching. I've had the honor of teaching at 1500 Sound Academy, their music biz fundamentals course, a couple times. And I really, approach teaching and mentorship in the same way of, when I was that 19-year-old who probably should have been like, who can I go to talk me through what it is that I'm signing? So I keep that in mind for all the folks that I work with. And so this is another reason why I'm super happy to be, a part of this program today. And I hope you guys, are able to get something from it.
Yeah, that's it's a lot going on over there, but there's a lot of good things, I
Great.
love it. I love it. I one key thing I learned, I know a lot of people, we always joked around in our group chats about, we always started off as artists or producers, or we always a creative, but sometimes we transition to the business side. So give me your perspective on that, like that transition of getting some of your artistry out versus you going into this business world and having that. Why was that important for you? I know you had talked about some of that stuff before of learning that aspect, versus just always being on the creative side.
I think the cool part about it for me is because I started out, on the artist side and on the creative side, transitioning over into the business side really made me see things from a different lens, because I always, looked at it from the perspective of, if I'm the artist, what is it that I need to know? What concepts do I need to grasp in order to protect myself? Like, what things would I want to, hold on to in terms of my rights? Which things would I be okay with, I guess, if you will, like, not necessarily giving up, but, which things am I willing to like bend and flex on, if I were to negotiate an agreement for myself. So I think that part has been helpful. Also, I think coming from the creative side too, it's been really awesome to sort of transition over into the business side, because now I understand that there are those differences between the recorded music side and the publishing side. I know you guys were just talking about publishing, and understanding not only how they're different, but how they're also monetized, and now being strategic and thinking about ways in which I get to counsel my clients to have them thinking about, okay, here are ways that you can bring in these multiple streams of income, you know, from your recordings, but now from your publishing, here's how we'll handle these things here, you know. And so it really, I think it helps me speak to my clientele a little bit better, because I completely understand what it is they're doing and what they're going through. And at the same time, when I think about it for myself, because I haven't released, you know, my project yet, it's also kind of like, oh gosh, I'm scared, you know, because it's like I get the paperwork part of it, you know, I get the rights portion and part of it, but now to kind of be thinking about becoming an artist and all of, like, oh Lord, that's overwhelming, but in a good way, you know. So it's for me, it's kind of cool, because it's like I haven't lived in that space, you know, as
Yeah.
long, I would say, long as I've been, you know, practicing as an attorney, and most of my professional career has been as a legal professional. So it's interesting, but having that perspective, I think, is the one thing that kind of like sets me apart from some of my colleagues that are in this business, because I think I approach it from, I'm a bit more empathetic. Let me
Yeah.
say that.
That makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah, yeah. So, we're gonna get down to what everybody's probably wanting to hear from you about. You've seen a lot of artist agreements at the highest level. I know you can't name any names, but what I want the students to kind of get your perspective from is, what are some things to look for? We hear about, these agreements. Even most recent one with Kendrick Lamar agreement may be up for grabs, or in this law case of being available. Like we seen Kanye a few years ago post his agreements on Twitter, things like that. So it's like, what
Because I
should,
had already read his.
yes, so what should artists be looking for in these agreements? They're looking to sign this. If they're a manager, if they're an artist, like independent, or wanting to get signed, what's some clauses and agreements to be looking out for, to kind of like, hey, I should know this, or I should ask for this.
The biggest things I would say are ownership, of course, you know, and the rights that are being granted. Are you owning the recordings? And right now we're talking specifically about, you know, the recorded side, if you're signing a label deal of some sort. Do you own your recordings, right? That ownership piece is really, really important. And there's
Should they
been
have to own it, not to cut you off, but should they own it up front, or is there some kind of clause to say, hey, we get it over time, kind of thing? I want you to go into that kind of thing.
So that's interesting, and how things can sometimes be, you know, structured. I'll say this, it's not far-fetched nowadays, for new artists to sign major label deals whereby the artist still retains ownership
Oh wow.
of recordings. That's
Okay.
not a far-fetched idea at this day and age. Was that far-fetched 10 years ago, 20 years ago? Hell to the yeah. Like you weren't getting that. You know, you'd have to probably come back and be like one of the biggest stars ever, and find a way to negotiate it. But even then, they weren't really trying to let go of too much. But I do think that it's definitely possible for a newer artist now to sign and to, you know, enter into what we would call a licensing deal on the recording side. But of course, like, ownership is important. How long you're going to be under the deal, like the term of the agreement. You know, is it an album? How many options do they have? Is it, you know, 2 options, 3 options to renew your contract, that kind of thing? That's important. Um, Let me see. The next thing, you know, people call it, you know, colloquially the 360, right? The entertainment rights. You know, that's nowadays, that's kind of a standard thing, you know. Once upon a time it wasn't, but now it is. And so it's like, what of those bundles of rights, or those other, you know, potential income streams, can the label collect on, and how much, right? And so need to be mindful of that as well, and like what you can potentially carve out. And then of course, how everything is being split. The money, the money always talks, right? So is this a profit share deal? Is this a royalty deal? There's so many different ways to sort of structure things. And so I think it really just depends on the deal at hand and what's important to the artist overall in being able to achieve the type of success that they want to have, So yeah, but those things I would say are kind of like the biggest points that they should hold on to.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's very important. I asked that question because I know a lot. That's the biggest thing. Like we hear about, like how do we negotiate this, or how do I leverage my brand and my artistry into these deals? And it just know it's important to know what things, because they're not teaching this, by the way. Like a lot of people, they're now
Nope.
more so, but they're not like really. They withhold that information. It's a negotiation. So sometimes they won't tell you that you can ask for that, and so it's important sometimes to kind of know what you're going into, what to ask for, what's kind of what's out there being kind of standard right now. Um, so looking back, throughout your career so far, what's one thing you wish you would have known earlier on before you embarked on this journey of a music career?
Oh, I thinking back to like my 19-year-old self who signed that production agreement, I am so grateful that, I look back on it and it's like, dang, I wish I would have known what I was signing and what those terms meant and, all of that. But at the same time, I'm actually really glad that I didn't know, because that was the thing that sort of launched me on the trajectory that I've been on these past, dare I say, 20 years now, And so I don't have any real regrets on anything, because I think that there's lessons to all of the stuff that I've been able to, that from all the experiences that I've had, I've been able to take really great lessons from each and every one of them and apply them. And I think part of the reason why I experienced that situation was so that I could learn, was so that I could also now come back and have moments like these where I get the opportunity to give that knowledge over to other people and to teach and to, even counsel my clients a certain way. Because without that, without that experience, I don't think I would have ever become an attorney.
Mm,
Never would have become an attorney.
gotcha. Yeah. So, um, what's some let me see. What is a fun thing about the music industry that people like? Maybe it's a myth, or maybe what are some things you want to debunk about the music industry that is fun, but there's some things that are, no, this is not what that is. This is because people, outside of the music industry, people have a certain lens on what it is,
Mhm.
whether it be the parties, or whether it be, oh, this is how labels run artists on top of the tables or whatever in these meeting rooms. Like, what are some fun stories or anything that you can share along this journey that can kind of like talk about some of those things people perceive the music industry to be?
Um, well, I will say that sometimes it's hard to get a +1 to the events.
We all know about that.
Okay, sometimes it is so hard to get a +1. And then another thing, because I'm in legal too, sometimes they don't want to invite legal because they think that we're the fun killers. And then I have to let them know, first of all, time out. I I am super cool and I need to be there. Thank you very much. Okay, so I have to do that sometimes. But let me see. Something else that is, oh, the one thing that I found since working in the industry too, is that I think a lot of times people think that the label is the one that, because I've had instances where producers have come and they're like, yay, I did this song with this artist and I haven't been paid, like I need the label to pay me. And we'll have to say, well, no, that's not our responsibility at the label. You got to take that up with the artist's camp. And so I think that's one of the things that people don't necessarily realize, is that the artist is responsible for entering into all of the agreements with the producers, engineers, mixers, whoever they are contracting with to create the songs, they've got to enter into those agreements with them. And then from there, they pass on those agreements to the label. What happens is in the agreements that they'll do with the producers is that there's something in there called the payments and everything else that, if they were paying a producer fee or, paying a producer's getting points on a record or something like that, they are negotiating that with the artist camp, right? And the artist's team. The artist in that agreement will then have what's called a letter of direction, or LOD for short. That LOD is then letting the label know, hey, I, artist, entered into this agreement with this producer. They're getting, X amount of dollars of a fee. And then they're also going to, get, I don't know, 3 points on a record, and they're on these songs here. Please pay them on my behalf, because the obligation to pay still sits with the artist. So the labels aren't going to pay anything out until they get that paperwork in. And I think that is the one, I guess, like most common misconception that I've, seen, especially the things like floating on like, social media and stuff like that, that people don't realize that, no, the label pays for it, but it's actually not their responsibility to pay. You've got to make sure you've papered the deals that you need to paper with the artist that you're working with. So hopefully that's a nugget.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. I think we always had those times where, okay, who's paying me? That they don't, like, sometimes producers don't care. Like, hey, all I know is y'all release the music, somebody got to pay me, and they somebody, you just knowing that where to go is very important, because or you won't get paid. You got
No.
to figure it out who to send the invoice to. That's a whole nother struggle. But
Yeah.
those plus ones, yes, as people in the industry, we still all struggle with a plus one, trying to get a plus one. So sometimes our friends, you can't ask it. Like, we see our friends at an event in the stores, hey, we know they may have not had a plus one, but so it's always it's cool to talk about some of those stories. But question, another question for is indie versus major. There's a big conversations happening in this industry right now, because there's so many tools that are happening for indie artists. So I think the playing field has been almost leveling a little bit, and indie may have a little, not necessarily more power, but they have a little more rights, more things, and more access than they had in the past. So, what are some things, some advice versus an indie versus a major? Because a lot of people think being like, now the conception is being signed to a label is bad. And I think that both of us, we had conversations. It could be good or bad based on your experiences, but it's I think people are so against the system that they don't know how to work the system. But tell me some I guess some pros versus indie versus major. I mean, kind of like your perspective on that, because I know you've seen on both sides.
Yeah. So I think, like I said before, historically, the labels, they controlled everything, they owned all the rights to all the recordings. They, and would pay whatever they paid. And they held like the distribution market as well. They printed your vinyls, they, had the CDs and cassettes made, and they put everything out into, they pretty much handled the supply chain, distribution, all of that. The moment the digital distribution boom happened, with your, what is it, DistroKid, TuneCore, CD Baby, once those things kind of came up and people realized that they could distribute their own music, without having, a label, and without having to find the gatekeepers to get signed and everything else and all of that, that really changed the industry, I think, a little bit more. And that's what, made it nowadays, I would say, easier for a newer artist to get a licensing deal straight off the gate, where they're able to retain ownership, because I feel like the labels recognize that in order for them to stay relevant, they also now had to change with the current times and find ways to be marketable, because to a certain extent, are they really needed? If you know that this is your career and you don't want to share in anything, you don't have to go to someone, right? So I think with that, the playing field definitely, at least from the standpoint of like barriers to entry and being able to get your music out there, that's certainly leveled everything, right? I think that people, if they're thinking of signing with a label, major label, versus staying independent, it really boils down to, in my humble opinion, like what type of success are you looking for, right? Because you can be incredibly successful as an independent artist. You really can. But are you trying to go global? And I think that's the appeal of being with a label, right? All of our big named artists, the Beyoncés, the Harry Styles, the Adeles, the Rihannas, the Kendrick Lamars, all of them have an affiliation with one of the big three. You know what I mean? And that's the thing. It's a marketing machine, I think, at this point, right? Because they've got bigger pockets. They've already got the infrastructure in place to help push and make you a global star if that's what you want. But again, it's really dependent upon what the artist wants and what their end goal is. And so I always, you know, counsel and caution people who are getting into this, think about what your end goal is. Where do you want to be? And now how do you get there? Right? Like, and that will help you, you know, determine and decide like which moves to make, what strategies and what things you need to be doing in order to get to your end goal. But you can be successful no matter where you land. It's still going to come down to your work ethic, you know? So
Yeah, we got a couple of questions in the chat I wanted to go to. I think it was from a previous um, question we had. It was, do many artists hire someone to specifically fill out these agreements and or these LODs and as far as to send those payments to the labels? You answered that, and I have another question to kind of piggyback off of that.
yes, they hire me. They hire me, they hire their attorneys. The attorneys are the ones that are typically helping them with this, or their management teams, you know, to negotiate these agreements. And then of course, if they are signed at the label, you know, they'll just then turn those documents over when they, what's called like delivery, right? And so when they deliver the, you know, album or whatever it is that they're putting out, they'll deliver over all of the assets, all of the, you know, stems and everything else, in addition to the contracts. And that's where like the A&R admin team comes in, because they're the ones administering the budgets and recording funds and are able to pay out the individuals necessary, you know, based off the recording fund that the artist has to create whatever project they're working on. But yeah, usually it's the artists, lawyers, and managers that are helping to facilitate those negotiations and to get that paperwork together.
Yeah, while we're on the concept of managing, because I knew that was going to come up in this question, at what level or what time do you feel like an artist is in need of a manager? Like, there's a lot of artists, independent artists, that sometimes may not know what a manager is. And like sometimes when I ask them a question, I say, when somebody say, "Hey, I need a manager," I say, "What do you need a manager for?" And a lot of times they're listing out things that can maybe be an assistant more than a manager. And so, which managers still handle a lot of the admin, of course, but it's not, as strenuous as, an assistant kind of work. But so at what level or should you consider or would you recommend an artist needing a manager at some point in their career?
That I think is one of those, that's one of those things where it's just kind of like, I think it just really depends on like what the artist needs. Like if you're someone who just needs direction from the very beginning, maybe you do need a manager, you know? But I think really most times you probably should get a manager when you have something A, to manage, and B, something that is no longer manageable for you because you have a lot of things going on. Because again, you got to pay your managers, you
Yeah.
know? Nobody's working for free, not in this economy, especially. So, you have to think about that as well. And to a certain extent, I think the biggest thing too is just making sure when you do decide to work with a manager, that your manager understands the business, or at least has the wherewithal to find the answers, and to be educated about the business, and to be willing to network as much as possible, and to cultivate relationships to help get you into certain doors, into certain rooms, and to be your biggest cheerleader, and to be helping you to think about strategy, think about like which direction your career is going to go in, which brand partnerships you possibly should enter into to help like bolster the marketing for something, and even just your career in general. What That's what they need to be there helping like the artists think through, and that's how they should really be earning their commissions as well. But I think, if you're an artist and you feel like you need to have another person because you're just getting started, and you need to have somebody else kind of like there helping to drive the boat with you, then by all means do it. I can't tell anybody when or why or they should, but just understand that if you are working with somebody, that at least those main things are happening. So
Gotcha. We got a couple more questions in the chat here. I think we'll go to James. I had Ron already. It says, how can an artist tell when they're truly ready to sign with a major? Meaning like, what's some of the, I guess it was also part of that question, is what gives an artist real leverage in negotiating a fair record label deal? And I think that's a good question. I can also help answer too, but I want to get your perspective and I can chime in on that.
when are they ready to sign with a major label? Really, that's again at any point in time. There are people who are literally just starting out, and maybe one of the A&Rs kind of got wind of, this person, and like what it is that they're doing, and want to develop them. They don't even have any music out. Like, sometimes that happens. You know what I mean? Maybe they don't have a big following. Maybe it's not, or maybe it could be that you are an independent artist. You already kind of have your own things going, and you want to scale your business. And the way I like to think of it is like in any other, because again, this is a business, guys. In any other, business sector, let's say if we were in the skincare business, right? I'm creating body butters and stuff like that, and I'm just selling them at my local flea market. But I want to get into a big box store like a Walmart or a Target, right? Because I think it can go far. And I've been doing this on my own. I've got my own little shop. Like, I'm growing consistently, and like that's my end goal. Sometimes partnering with the right individual and, getting that influx of cash will help me to, create the supply that I need in order to have my products in these bigger stores and to sell. And I think if you're an indie artist and you've already kind of got that thing going, then maybe partnering with a major label gives you, that they become your investor to a certain extent, right? Again, it's all relative to the artist in terms of what is it that they want ultimately. Like, what does success look like for you? And once you have defined that, then you can find ways working with your team to create that for yourself. Does that give you, and what's your leverage? I think was the second part of the question.
Yeah.
Do you have real leverage when negotiating with a record deal? You always have leverage. You always have leverage, because at any point in time, you can just say no, right? You can always walk away from a deal. Never forget that. Even if you feel like you're brand new to it or whatever, like that's going to always be your leverage. If you're not going to get the things that you want out of the deal, you've got to be willing to know like what your bottom line is, what things you're willing to compromise on, and which things are just absolutely non-negotiable, right? And you'll find times that, the labels, because I did these deals, BA never wants the deal to die with them. We don't want to be responsible for killing the deal. Okay, we don't. So if the deal doesn't get done, it's because A&R didn't want to do it, or maybe the artist decided they were going to go to somebody else. But it's never really truly because BA is like, we're not going to do, we're not going to do this deal. That's not how it goes. So I think being able to have a fair deal Obviously, I'm going to always say have an attorney with you, and not just any attorney. They need to be somebody who like is in the music industry, because it is such a nuanced industry. It's not the same as being in TV and film. It's not the same as being in just, a typical business attorney. It is very niche and very specialized. So you really want to work with someone who understands, what this stuff means and what it is. And from there, figure out your strategy. But there is really no one size fits all, except for the fact that some of your best leverage is knowing what it is that you want and not being willing to compromise on like those non-negotiables, and saying no when you want to walk.
Yeah, and I've seen recently. I'm not gonna give any specific artist examples, maybe, but artists that have songs that are going viral online, that's a lot of times the first part of the leverage that you may have. Like if you've been posting, you're real active on social media, which I believe every artist, if you want to, if I go to your page, I need to know you're an artist. That's at least how I feel. Especially if you're pursuing that. If you're pursuing other things, I get it. You posting, half this, half that. But if you're, you should be singing or whatever. But uh, putting your music out is very important, and getting in front of the people, because once you get in reaction from the people online, labels are looking all the time
All
online.
the time.
Like they're in people DMs. You got head of labels following. I'm not going to say the executive, but I know a lot of some funny presidents. They be following the artist. I'm like, dang, they follow them early too, before they even got 10,000 followers. That's okay. I'm gonna just watch this artist, see how they grow. But I think that's the leverage. I'll give you one example because it's most recent. That Jello, that one of the Ball brothers, whatever his name is. But that song went up online. Of course, he had the Ball brothers. He was in the NBA, or brothers in the NBA, but that song went very viral. He ended up getting a big deal off of that one song. But there's other artists like him, even though the song, it don't have to be good. But if the song is doing well online, they'll work with you. You have a lot of leverage there. That's one leverage piece that you have. Building your audience, I think, is the biggest leverage piece as an artist that want to be signed, because I do agree with Channing that success does look different for every artist, because there's some artists that are eating very well that are not signed to any label, and they are just happy not making $100 million, but they're making way more than almost a half a mil or $1 million a year off of just touring. Like they built an audience and they go that route. So you do have to like really write down those line items that you need over there. And I think it was one question at the bottom I wanted to touch on before we moved on from that. It says, what steps, once an artist gets signed, what steps can that artist avoid being shelved or overlooked after signing with the major label? Do you have some thoughts on that, Channing?
Hmm. So that's a little different, because that's much more of like a business situation at the label. Like what they want to put out. Sometimes regime changes happen, and maybe the label decides in that regime change, this artist that they sign, they don't want to, put things out. I can't really give too much on that, because it really is it really is one of those that kind of just depends. But I think, you know, if the artist is working, diligently and staying in contact like with their A&R, and their A&R person is, there and still helping to kind of like, work through the creative process on the album and stuff, then I feel like that shows a lot of dedication and a lot of like persistence and like wanting to get everything out. I will say that, a lot of the labels have like their in-house marketing teams and stuff like that, and being able to be receptive and getting to know, the project managers on your team as an artist that are at the labels, if you're signed to a major, being in their faces a lot I think is also probably one of the things too that kind of helps, because it's like top of, you know what I mean? Like top of mind, you're kind of like, these are the things that you're working on. But ultimately, if the business decides to go a certain way, like who's to say, what it is? That's more of a business call, and not necessarily a call for the artist or even the lawyers that are at the label to make, so.
Yeah. Sometimes it's not really on the artist. It's usually on the in-house going on. But there's one approach I've seen another artist he used the sync department. sync licensing department. He working on, that's the sync department. They do the film, TV placements with gaming, advertising, film, TV, all those big projects. And I remember the sync team love those artists that comes to them because sometimes they are looking for other artists to support on within the label, and they get these cool briefs that we may not have a track for, but it may be a soundtrack opportunity or in title for a movie opportunity or even an advertising brand that they can create from. And so I've seen artists utilize the sync department to stay relevant in house because sometimes you even see I've seen an artist get kind of what they quote unquote shelved, but they was bringing money in, so they kind of was like they had to force the other side of the label to pay attention. So that was another strategy I can throw out there that I've seen people do. um we're You had a
AD,
question, Jay?
yeah, I was just gonna say because we haven't started on sync, that's gonna be next week. So could you explain, or either one of you explain a little bit more what sync is, just for
I'm gonna
knowledge?
let AD take that one.
I'll do it since it's my world.
AD is the perfect person for that.
Yes.
Good segue.
So sync licensing real quick. What that is it's where you every label has a sync department. And also if you're an independent artist, there are sync agencies out there where you can tap into to get your music pitched to music supervisors. Music supervisors are the people that are exploiting media or audio into a picture format or be an advertising. So you've seen your commercials, you hear music. Anywhere you hear music, even in elevators, there's music that is everywhere that can be synced into those programming and you get paid. And so I don't want to go too deep, James, because I know there's in music and song, I know you talked about publishing. So in the song, there's a master and there's a publishing side. And so you get paid on both. So if you own 100% of both sides, so say it's 5,000 coming in for a placement, you will get 100% of that unless you have like an agent. They'll take their percentage and kind of go from there. But if you were the indie side, but if you're in the label, sometimes those sync licensing fees are recoupable in the agreement of the money that they gave you up front, and then once you recouped, that money then goes to you if you have publishing on it. There's those certain percentages. So sync licensing is a pretty big like moment since the pandemic because when pandemic would have shut down the world, touring stopped. There wasn't a lot of live shows. Everybody said, okay, as artists, how can we make money? And so everybody came to our department. And so we're just literally pitching music to clients, whether it be on to Netflix, whether it be to Hulu, whether it be to Sony Pictures or, or Saatchi and Saatchi, or even the Olympics coming up, sporting events, anywhere you can think of, there's an opportunity to get paid. And then not only sometimes you get an upfront sync fee, you get paid royalties on the back end if you have publishing, a percentage of publishing. They have to report that to what they call your PROs or your performance rights organizations like ASCAP, BMI. So I know you're going to go through a quick lesson through that next week, but that's just another revenue generating for yourself as an artist to have access to. And it's very important, to have your paperwork set up, like as Channing was talking in the beginning, because once once you release a song, you definitely, you want to you want to know who has the rights, who's the ownership. Even if you're indie, you have to build an Excel spreadsheet of all your songs, who the writers on each song. So when you get a request or you get an opportunity to work with a sync agency, then you will be ready to kind of like, okay, I have my stuff together. How can I get support or get my items pitched? But we definitely go a deeper dive on that another time. But if any more questions on that, we can go forward and I can ask. But that's the gist of it. I don't want to go too deep because it'll get confusing. It gets too deep into it because there's so much. So we're in the part of the time where it's a lot more questions. I kind of like we had a lot of good questions that I wanted to ask anyways in the chat. So it was right there before we wrap up. But if there are any more questions about just anything about the business of music, how many of you guys are artists or interested in becoming in the music industry as executives? Where are those people at? Any questions?
Come off mute if you
You can
want,
come off
or
mute. Yeah, go ahead. Or if you can. I don't know if who we got to.
We have Ron up. Go ahead, Ron.
Hello. Um, Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today and answer all of these questions. So I had a question about that tapped into the anti-shelving clause a bit, because I know that, none of us who are signing to a major label are wanting to end up getting our stuff shelved. And so I was wondering if should it be like something that the artist mandates in the negotiation that there be like an anti-shelving clause, or is that likely when negotiating with a major label?
Interesting, Channing. I'll let you take that.
Yeah. So, so actually, there's something sometimes in major label agreements that's called like a pay or play clause, right? And so
Mhm.
what this pay or play clause is saying that, like, if for whatever reason you've already started recording your project and the label is actually just like, you know what, we really don't want this album, we don't want you to do it, there is, depending on what's already been paid out in terms of the recording, the initial recording fund, sometimes you would get like a payment to, since they don't want to play, they've got to pay you to go from, to go from there. And usually if they're also entering into a pay or play clause, it's also because they are going to terminate the relationship too. Like that's where you kind of get, feel like you're getting dropped basically, right? And so there will be a termination agreement that accompanies that. But the pay or play clauses are typically in there, and it's, you kind of can't keep it from happening because it is the label's it's up to the discretion of the label as to whether or not they want to complete the project or not. It's also up to the discretion of the label to, if you get an option, for them to exercise the option to renew your agreement, for another term or whatever, or to extend the term. So it's up to them, but that clause is typically in there, and how that is negotiated is dependent upon, the artist's attorney and all these other factors, but it can be negotiated. But it can be negotiated. Yeah.
Totally. Thank you so much. And with the pay or play clause, is it typical, let's say if they drop the artist and they say we don't like this project anymore, can the artist then take at least the writing of that project and release it elsewhere? Because I imagine that the record label has ownership of like the recording element. So they pull a Taylor Swift or something.
So assuming the label owns those records, and that's something that would have been negotiated up front when I was talking about like ownership or whatever. If the deal is one in which the label owns, then that is a separate negotiation for the termination agreement as to whether or not they will allow the artist to take those recordings with them when they leave. And so that's a situation. If in fact it was a license deal, that meant that the artist own, typically the artist, or maybe like the artist, if they're signed to another production company, or whomever is entering into this recording agreement, they are the ones who are owning the recordings. So they essentially will be just taking their things with them because it's theirs to begin with. They were just exclusively licensing, the rights to distribute those recordings to the major label at that point. So it all really truly boils down to A, the ownership piece from the original agreement, and then B, when the termination agreement is being negotiated, what's being asked for and how, they want to basically break up. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I have one last question on the licensing, if that is permittable.
Yay!
So I was wondering, of course, like to become global as an artist, it is advantageous to sign to a major label. Um, is it possible to kind of gain that same amount of success through a licensing deal with a major label?
I will also
Absolutely.
go ahead, Channing.
Yay. Oh, yeah, because at the end of the day, like the licensing deal with a major label is simply the fact that the artist is licensing the rights to the recordings to the label to promote them. It's not going to take away from the label's overall end goal, which is to make money off of the recordings, right? So they're still going to put forth the same effort, assuming they want to put these things out. and they're going to abide by whatever is in the agreement. So sometimes, you know, there are certain artists who will have like what's considered a marketing commitment, like X amount of dollars are being committed to market this project, you know, in these territories or in this certain way. And again, any type of money that the labels put up is typically going to be recoupable against the artist account. But at the same time, knowing that you have these budgets that they are committing contractually to put forth for marketing in certain areas, I think is really important as well. So sometimes artists do try to like shoot for that, you know, to get an actual marketing commitment of X amount of dollars to help fund, you know, help push their records. But at the end of the day, everybody is working to kind of do that because that's how the label makes its money. That's how the label is able to keep people, you know, keep itself running, and pay for its employees and everything else. And so, unless, of course, they're looking at it from another, again, a business standpoint. And when I say business, I mean like the folks in finance and everything else, or whomever they're going, this is going to be a loss for us, or if we probably need to pivot another way. It's all gonna happen. But then at the same time, I don't want artists to think that all of the work is going to fall onto the labels, because it's not. The artist for sure has to still show up, because I think a lot of times people think, oh, I just signed a deal, and so now I get to kind of like sit back and kick my feet up. And it's like, oh, no, no, no. The real work is now coming, right? Because now you've got bigger investors with deeper pockets, and they want to see that ROI at the end of the day. So you've got more that you have to do now, because they're opening up so many more doors. So for the artist, again, that's why it's really important that you understand where you're trying to go. You know what I mean? What is it that you're trying to do? Because you are going to be working like crazy. So do you have that work ethic? Of course, if you do, have at it. Go have fun. We see how hard Beyonce works, but she's Beyonce for a reason, right? Because she doesn't stop. And I'm going to see her in a few weeks. So
Me too.
okay, I'm gonna go see my girl on the 28th. Stop playing. I don't know her yet.
Same.
We're aspiring. But at the end of the day, right, you got to have the work ethic. So it's about figuring out what success means to you as the artist and what your end goal is, and going after that in that way.
Channing, would you say a licensing deal and distribution deal, those are different, right?
They are.
So I was going to answer that a little bit. That distribution deals, there's some global distributors as well that provide some upfront marketing dollars to exploit your music, put it out there, and do all the digital marketing, seeding campaigns, and things like that. So if you're looking to go global, you can do that as well. Like there are some that label major, every major label has their own distributor, but as well there's some independent major distributors out there too that you can tap in with. And you can literally Google. I don't want to leave anybody out, so I'm not going to name anybody, but they're all there when you pull it up.
Thank you
Any
so
other
much.
questions? Oh, no problem, Ron. Thank you. Any other
Thank you.
questions?
No more questions? Well, I think we did a good job, huh?
I think we did. Well, if there's no more questions, I only had one more, kind of like to kind of close it out. What would you leave an inspiring artist, music executive? What are some advice, some encouraging words you would leave with them to embark on this journey? Because we know it's a long one.
You mean like the journey to becoming an attorney?
Coming, the journey to get there, to get to the point where you are, or what are some advice could you give, like, to encourage them to, like, on this journey that they're about to embark upon in the music, executive side, business side, or as an artist or creative?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is just remain optimistic. You know what I mean? Like, and set goals for yourself that are attainable, like the ones that you can get to, right? Maybe sometimes you have to like reverse engineer some things. You know what I mean? It's like, obviously for me becoming an attorney, I was like, well, in order for me to become an attorney, there's these other things that I have to do, right? So how do I knock these things out? The law school portion, the passing the bar, you know what I mean? Those are the things that I have to get to in order to be able to say that I'm a practicing attorney. Sometimes it's kind of like what you have to do. And all of it is going to be hard, no matter which way you go through. Which if you want to, you know, go the executive route, or if you want to go the artist route, you are going to have some sort of opposition that kind of comes up and that could potentially, you know, try to knock you out of your way. If you're a spiritual person, you know where I'm getting at. And if not, it's okay, because it's still the universe that's kind of working. It wants to see how badly you want this end goal, right? So working hard at that, understanding what your goals are, and then also operating a lot through integrity. You know, like your integrity and your morals, that is like the biggest thing ever, because there will be times where people try to play you or try to tempt you for something, or if you're not a strong person, you might be thrown off your course. So you really need to like know who you are, know whose you are and what you're working for, and move forward accordingly. But I mean, understanding that there will be some bad days popping up, it's not going to be, you know, that hard when when you encounter that bad day, because you knew it was coming, which means you also know that you're going to get through it, right? So I think that mindset is everything, and work ethic. I mean, that's the biggest thing: mindset and work ethic. If you believe you will achieve, then you will. If you think you're going to fail, then you will. So get yourself, you know, thinking of that, and every damn goal is attainable. Okay. It really is. I don't think that there's anything hard in this world. I think it just really boils down to how hard am I willing to work for it. That's all.
Hey, that's a pin drop on that.
Oh, thanks.
That's it. That sums it up then right there.
I think Olivia had a question.
Oh, Olivia had a question. Go ahead.
There we go. Hi. Yes, thank you guys so much for all of the amazing knowledge that you were dropping on us today. I guess I had like kind of a personal-ish question, like, are you accepting new clients?
And Pam,
What would be the best way to contact you?
I'm gonna put my email address into the chat.
Awesome.
Great question.
Thank you.
Yeah, well,
Are you
shout
guys
out
on,
to-
are you guys on LinkedIn too?
yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll always send
I
people.
LinkedIn on the chat too.
Can you put your put that in the chat as well as your IG, and I hope you all have already followed Live Out Loud, which they posted that in the chat earlier. So yeah, all that information is how we try to extend our network in this class. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah. Shout out to Skylar and the Grammy Museum. Shout out to Live Out Live and Candace. And thanks so much for Channing, doing this. You know, it's a lot of fun when you're working with your friends in the industry. So remember your
Really
peers,
is.
remember your people beside you. You may be working with them one day. So you just never know.
It's so true, AD. And thank you so much, Channing, for sharing your time. Channing is a peer and a friend of mine as well in the industry, who I have a lot of respect for in what she does in this business. And so I knew that she would bring a lot of insight and representation, right? As really a smart woman that's excellent in her field and that's aspiring for excellence in her life. So I think that it was good that we were able to hear from Channing. I learned so much myself that I had no idea about, and tips that I, as a business entrepreneur and professional, will be taking away with me as well. And I'm just grateful again for Skylar for allowing Live Out Live to collaborate on industry sessions and allowing us to bring professionals like Channing and AD to have these conversations and share best practices and tips about themselves. I know that it means a lot to these young people. And so thanks so much, Channing and AD and Skylar. And I don't know, Skylar, if you want to close us out, but thanks so much again.
Absolutely. Channing, AD, thank you so much for your time. Candace, always thank you. We will be back next week. Candace will be back on to bring us more industry professionals. I think one thing AD just said at the end is great to work with your friends, and all of you may end up being, people who work with each other in the industry. So it's definitely good to make relationships. I know our instructor James highlights networking all the time. So this is just a perfect example of how that plays out in real time. So but that's all that we have. We'll see you all next week. You guys enjoy the rest of your week, and thank you so much.
James, thanks for letting us crash your
AD,
class
good
today.
seeing
We'll
you.
be back for more.
See you next week.
All right.
It was awesome.
See you
Thank you.
next week.
All right, no
Thank
problem.
you.
See ya. Bye-bye.
Thank you
Bye.
so much.
No problem.
Thank you.